Let me start with a confession. I don't actually like the word God. I never have. I grew up in Oklahoma, but unlike most of the people around here, I wasn't raised a Christian. I wasn't raised anything. There was no church, no Bible study, no youth group. As far back as I can remember, I was an atheist, and not the casual kind, the annoying kind, the religion is obviously made up kind, the kind that thought spirituality was just wishful thinking and mystical experiences were probably psychological glitches. The weird thing is, I'm still not completely convinced that I'm wrong. But I can also no longer say with honesty that reality is what I thought it was. Because over the course of my life, I've had experiences that refuse to fit neatly into the materialistic worldview that I started with. The first one happened when I was 8 years old. I was getting ready for bed one night and I saw an orb floating in my room. My sister saw it too. Now, could there be a perfectly rational explanation? Sure, maybe, but it stuck with me. Then when I was 18, I was practicing a meditation technique called Tritaka, and one day something happened. The best way that I can describe it is that suddenly I felt connected to everything. Not as a belief or not as an idea, but as an experience. It hit me so hard that I had to walk outside, go outside my house, and just sit with it. For a brief moment, the boundary between me and everything else seemed less solid than I'd always assumed. It wasn't until later that I realized that this was a third eye opening experience. Hell, I didn't even know what Tritaka meditation was, or what it was called, or that it is often called the third eye meditation. I didn't know any of that stuff until a couple of years ago. And that feeling that I had, that extreme feeling of connectedness, it kind of faded. And because I was an atheist, I immediately started trying to explain it away. Maybe it was brain chemistry, maybe suggestion, maybe meditation-induced weirdness, case closed. For the next couple decades, life went on. I got married, I had kids, got a job, paid bills, did all the normal adult things that you do. And through all of it, I remained fundamentally skeptical. I wasn't looking for a guru. I wasn't trying to join a religion. I wasn't searching for any new belief system. But there was one thing that never really left me alone. and that was meditation. I've been drawn to it for as long as I can remember. I just found it interesting. So every now and then I'd go deeper, experiment with different techniques, see what happened. And eventually, things happened. Things happened that I couldn't ignore. During meditation, my body started moving on its own. At first, it was subtle and gradual, nothing too dramatic. Being skeptical, I assumed that it was muscle tension releasing, stress, fatigue, something completely ordinary. But the movements, they became more dramatic, more elaborate, more coordinated, and definitely not intentional. My neck would move, my arms would move, my posture would change. Sometimes I felt compelled to make sounds. Sometimes there were breathing patterns that seemed to happen automatically. And the entire time I was thinking, what the hell is this? I wasn't trying to make it happen. In fact, part of me wanted it to stop. Because when your body starts doing things by itself, your first thought isn't spiritual awakening. Your first thought is, am I losing my mind? So I became genuinely concerned. Not because the experience was painful, but just because it was weird. Really weird. So I did what any skeptical person would do. I started Googling. And that's when things got even stranger, because I kept finding descriptions that matched what I was experiencing. Not vaguely, specifically. Exactly what I was experiencing. In yogic traditions, these spontaneous movements are often called kriyas. And there were descriptions of involuntary body movements, descriptions of unusual breathing patterns called pranayama, descriptions of spontaneous vocalizations, descriptions of energetic sensations. These were all descriptions written long before I was born. Descriptions that were written before the internet. Written before I had ever heard the word kriya. And that was the part that got me. Not the experiences themselves. The experiences could be anything. The brain is capable of all kinds of extraordinary things. But finding people who had described the same territory centuries earlier, that's hard to dismiss. It felt less like I was inventing something and more like I had stumbled into a conversation that had already been going on for a very long time. Now, to be clear, this didn't suddenly turn me into a believer. I didn't throw skepticism out the window. I didn't decide that every claim in every spiritual tradition was automatically true. I still don't. In fact, one of the most frustrating answers I can give about these experiences is I don't know. Maybe they're neurological. Maybe they're psychological. Maybe they're somatic releases. Maybe there's something else entirely. I genuinely don't know. And I think pretending to know for anybody would be dishonest. But throughout this whole thing, there was another experience that kept showing up. Something that yoga traditions sometimes call the witness or the observer, the awareness behind thought. And so every now and then during meditation, there would be this strange shift. Thoughts were still happening. Sensations were still happening. Emotions are still happening. But they begin to feel no longer like me. Instead, there was simply awareness observing them with detachment, watching them come and go. The emotions, the thoughts, sensations, like clouds passing through the sky. And for brief moments, the usual story of who I was seemed less important, less solid, less real. Not gone, just seen from a different perspective. And when, I later discovered that yogic philosophy had entire frameworks built around this experience, I had the same reaction I had with the Kriyas. Not certainty, but recognition. The feeling of reading something and thinking, wait a second, that's exactly what happened to me. It's like validation. And that's probably the closest thing I have to a reason for identifying with Hindu or yogic thought. Not belief, but experience. I've experienced it. Because if a tradition repeatedly describes things that you've actually encountered, you naturally become curious about what else it might know, what else might be there. And that doesn't mean the tradition is infallible, and it doesn't mean that every claim is true. It doesn't mean you found the final answer. It just means that you've found a map that seems surprisingly familiar. And to me, that's different from faith. So here we are, an atheist from Oklahoma sitting in front of a camera talking about spiritual experiences. life is weird like that. And mostly, I don't know. So, if you want someone that has all the answers, you're going to have to go join a cult. Because all I can give you is my take from my experiences and hope that it helps you on your journey. That's all I have for today. Thanks for watching.